The guards thought they had captured a man. They were wrong. They had trapped something far worse. The air inside Zenitar Prime *** was stale, recycled one too many times through the massive prison's ventilation systems. The Imperial facility, built deep beneath the surface of a barren moon, had a reputation. It was where the worst of the worst disappeared. War criminals, rogue mercenaries, political dissidents. No one escaped Zenitar Prime. At least, that's what the Empire believed. Phantom sat in the cold metal chair of Interrogation Room 6, his wrists locked in phase-reinforced restraints. A single strip of flickering white light buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the steel walls. Across from him, an Imperial interrogator sneered, flipping through a datapad. "Name?" the interrogator asked. His uniform was pristine, adorned with a high-ranking officer's silver insignia. The kind of man who had never seen real combat, only barked orders from behind reinforced bulkheads. Phantom said nothing. The interrogator smirked, leaning forward. "You were picked up outside Loria 9, just after a high-value Imperial target was found dead. An assassination, clean and precise. Our intelligence believes you were responsible." Again, Phantom remained silent. "Your kind is always the same," the interrogator continued, chuckling. "Humans think they're special, tougher than the average soldier. But you're not the first human to be caught, and you won't be the last." Still, Phantom didn't react. He barely blinked. The interrogator sighed. "Fine. You'll talk soon enough. Everyone does." He motioned to the guards by the door. "Take him to holding. The warden will decide what to do with him." The two armored guards grabbed Phantom by the arms and hauled him to his feet. He allowed himself to be dragged down the dimly lit corridor, past rows of reinforced cell doors. Energy barriers shimmered in front of each one, containing prisoners from all over the Empire. None of them mattered. Phantom had already counted the guards. He had memorized their patrol routes. He had noted the locations of every security camera, every blind spot, every potential weapon within reach. Because they thought they had captured him. In reality, he had let them. They forced him into a reinforced containment cell, its energy barrier humming to life behind him. The guards laughed, one of them tapping the controls on his wrist gauntlet. "You'll rot in here, human," the guard sneered. Phantom remained motionless, waiting, calculating, ***. The moment the guards left, he shifted slightly, rolling his wrists within the restraints. The Empire's engineers prided themselves on their containment tech, but they always made the same mistake. They designed their security against prisoners, not against him. A faint click echoed in the silence as Phantom dislocated his thumb, allowing the restraint to slip just enough for movement. He shifted again, subtle but precise. 30 more seconds. That was all he needed. Outside, the guards were laughing, exchanging stories. They weren't paying attention. Then, ***, the screaming started. ***. It came from the adjacent cell block. A sharp, guttural cry of agony, followed by the sickening thud of a body collapsing. The guards snapped to attention. What the hell? Another scream. Then another. Panic erupted through the corridor as red warning lights flashed across the prison's control panels. The guards rushed toward the disturbance, their weapons raised. Phantom allowed himself a small, almost imperceptible smile. Right on schedule. His plan had begun. The Empire had no idea. They thought they were the hunters. But in Zenitar Prime, trapped with him, they were nothing more than prey. And before the night was over, this prison would belong to him. The first death was a warning. The second was a promise, ***. Zenitar Prime was built to withstand riots, breakouts, and full-scale prison revolts. It had never been breached. Yet, as alarms howled through the facility, security teams sprinted down the cold metal corridors, weapons drawn, fear in their eyes. Something was inside with them, and it was killing them. The first body was found slumped against a bulkhead, throat cut so cleanly that the wound barely bled. The second was discovered near the security terminal, his own rifle wedged between his ribs. No alarms had triggered during the attacks. No cameras had captured movement. Phantom moved like a ghost, slipping between shadows, using the chaos as his cover. He had set the plan in motion before he was even captured. While the guards had interrogated him, while they had paraded him through the prison, Phantom had been analyzing, calculating, waiting. He knew that the only way out of a place like Zenitar Prime wasn't to escape. It was to burn it down from the inside. Now, the prison's guards were scrambling, cutting off access points, sealing corridors. Doing exactly what he wanted them to do. They were dividing themselves. A squad of 5 moved cautiously through the dimly lit hallway leading to his cell block, their rifles sweeping the area. Their leader, Sergeant Vallis, was barking orders into his comms. We've got multiple casualties. Unknown assailant. Lockdown sectors 3 and 4. Click. The sound was almost imperceptible. A faint, mechanical snap from the ceiling vent. It was the last thing Vallis ever heard. A blur of motion dropped from above. A flash of steel slicing through the air. A single brutal strike, and Vallis was gone. The remaining 4 guards had no time to react before Phantom was among them. His movements precise, efficient. One fell before he could even raise his weapon. The second tried to scream, but Phantom crushed his windpipe with a silent, practiced strike. The third fired wildly, but Phantom was already behind him, twisting his arm and turning the shot into his own teammate. The last man dropped his weapon and ran. Phantom let him go. Fear was more useful than death. By the time the fleeing guard reached the command center, his words were barely coherent. He's not human. He's picking us off one by one. The warden of Zenitar Prime, Administrator Karen, clenched his fists. What do you mean he? You're telling me a single prisoner is doing this? The guard just nodded, eyes wild. Karen turned to his security chief. Deploy the full garrison. I want every corridor locked down. The chief hesitated. Sir, if we seal the corridors, we risk cutting off our own men. Karen's jaw tightened. I don't care. Do it. And find this bastard before we lose complete control. What he didn't realize was that they had already lost it. Inside the security hub, Phantom moved with silent efficiency. The 2 guards stationed at the terminal had barely seen him before it was over. Now, their lifeless bodies slumped over the controls, the screens flashing red with warnings. He placed a small data spike into the system, overriding protocols, rerouting security commands. Every camera feed went dark. Every cell door in Block 9 unlocked at once. From deep within the prison, a new kind of chaos erupted. Zenitar Prime had contained some of the worst criminals in the galaxy. Now they were free. Phantom stepped back into the shadows as the alarms shifted, not in response to him, but to the hundreds of prisoners now storming the halls. The guards were overwhelmed. They had expected one man. They weren't prepared for war. And in the center of it all, Phantom moved unseen, untouched. Untouchable. This was no longer just an escape. It was a reckoning. The obsidian blades didn't fear death. But tonight, they would learn to fear something worse. Phantom moved through the corridors like a shadow, his stolen rifle slung across his back, his knife still wet from the last kill. The prison riot had turned Zenitar Prime into a war zone, but it wasn't over yet. The obsidian blades were here, and they were hunting him. He welcomed the challenge. From a security overlook, he spotted the strike team moving with lethal precision, 6 heavily armored operatives, their weapons raised, their formation tight. They weren't panicking like the prison guards. These were professionals. Killers. Phantom had faced their kind before. They always thought they were prepared. They never were. He ghosted through the vents, positioning himself above their path. Calculated. Methodical. As the lead operative gave a silent hand signal, Phantom struck. A single grenade, pulled, dropped, forgotten. The explosion rocked the corridor, the force hurling 2 of the blades into the walls. Phantom dropped down into the smoke, moving like a phantom through the wreckage. A blade to the throat. A gunshot through the visor. By the time the dust cleared, 4 were dead. The last 2 scrambled for cover, their armor scorched, their confidence shattered. Phantom retrieved a fallen rifle, his voice cold and even. "You were sent here for me." One of the blades, his breathing ragged, tried to raise his weapon. Phantom shot him twice. *** chest. Head ***. The final soldier hesitated, gripping his rifle, sweat dripping down his forehead. "You're not human," the man whispered. Phantom didn't answer. A single shot. The last obsidian blade collapsed. The hunt was over. Phantom moved fast. The prison's docking bay was now open, his window to escape. He slipped through the wreckage, stepping over bodies, past dying embers of the riot he had started. Alarms still blared, but the fight was gone from the remaining guards. Some were surrendering to the freed prisoners. Others had locked themselves away, hoping to live through the night. Phantom didn't care. At the docking bay, a single Imperial transport waited, engines running. Exactly what he needed. He stepped onto the ramp, feeling the hum of the ship beneath his boots. Escape was within reach. Then a new voice crackled through the prison's comms. Low, cold, dangerous. "You're impressive, Phantom, but I'm afraid I can't let you leave." Phantom's eyes narrowed. This wasn't over. Not yet. Zenitar Prime was supposed to hold its prisoners. Now it was holding its executioners. The once orderly prison had collapsed into anarchy. Fires burned in the hallways, alarms screamed over the chaos, and security forces were losing ground fast. The first wave of prisoners, murderers, warlords, exiled mercenaries, had surged through the cell blocks, turning on their captors with years of pent-up rage. Guards who weren't killed in the initial riot were now barricading themselves in fortified rooms, hoping the Empire would send reinforcements before they were found. It wouldn't matter. Phantom wasn't waiting for reinforcements. He had already won. From a concealed vantage point, he observed the carnage below, the Empire's proud enforcers dying in their own facility. He had turned their prison into a battlefield, one where only he knew the rules. The riot was his cover. The real objective lay ahead. Security doors leading to the Warden's command center were still sealed, one of the few places not yet overrun. Phantom moved with silent precision, his stolen uniform blending with the chaos. He walked among the prisoners, unseen, slipping past the raging firefights toward his next target. The Warden was the key. He had access codes, ship clearance, command overrides, everything Phantom needed to leave Zenitar Prime behind. As Phantom approached the restricted section, a new voice crackled through the prison's comms. "Attention all forces. This is Commander Zalvek of the Obsidian Blades. Stand down and surrender, or you will be neutralized." Phantom stopped mid-step. That name wasn't just an empty threat. The Obsidian Blades weren't standard enforcers. They were the Empire's elite killers, used to eliminate high-priority threats. They weren't here to suppress a riot. They were here for him. Phantom's expression didn't change, but his mind adjusted. His timeline had just shortened. The moment the Blades secured the Warden, his only leverage would be gone. He moved. 2 guards stood at the entrance to the command center, rifles tight in their grip. They weren't panicked like the others. They were too well trained. Obsidian Blades. They never saw him coming. A knife through the throat of the first. A twist of the wrist, snapping the second's neck before he could even draw his weapon. Phantom didn't waste time. He swiped the clearance card off the second man's corpse and pressed it against the door scanner. The metal doors hissed open. Inside, Warden Karen was frantically typing at his console, trying to override system locks. His eyes snapped up as Phantom entered, his face draining of color. How did you?" Phantom didn't answer. He simply raised his stolen pistol and placed it against the Warden's head. "Override the lockdown," Phantom said, his voice quiet, controlled. Karen's hand trembled over the keyboard. "Can't. The system's been restricted by Commander Zalvek." Phantom struck, fast and brutal. The Warden collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath, his ribs likely shattered. He tried again. "Override the lockdown." With shaking fingers, Karen obeyed. Security fields dropped. Docking bays reopened. Zenitar Prime was no longer a prison. It was an exit. Phantom turned toward the Warden, who was still struggling to breathe. For a moment, Karen thought maybe, maybe he would be spared. Then Phantom raised the pistol. One shot. No hesitation. He had no time for loose ends. As Phantom stepped out of the control room, the echoes of approaching boots filled the corridor. The obsidian blades had arrived. But they were too late. The hunt had already begun. And they weren't the hunters. They were the prey. The Empire thought they were containing a threat. Instead, they had created one, asterisk. Phantom froze at the base of the transport's ramp, his instincts screaming a warning. The voice over the prison's comms was calm, measured, but beneath it lay the unmistakable weight of certainty, the confidence of a man who believed he had already won. Phantom knew that tone well. It belonged to a predator. A figure stepped into view from the shadows of the docking bay, a massive, cybernetically enhanced warrior clad in blackened Imperial armor. Commander Zalvek, the Empire's last line of defense. Zalvek was no standard enforcer. He was a warlord killer, built to eliminate anything the Empire deemed too dangerous to be left alive. And tonight, that was Phantom. "You've caused quite the mess," Zalvek said, voice edged with amusement. "But it ends here." Phantom didn't respond. He simply moved. A single shot, center mass. A direct hit. Zalvek barely flinched. His armor absorbed the impact, his cybernetic implants neutralizing the shock. Then he charged. Fast, too fast for a man of his size. Phantom dodged, rolling clear as Zalvek's first strike cratered the transport's hull. The impact alone was enough to bend reinforced steel. This wasn't just a fight. It was survival. Phantom pivoted, emptying the rest of his clip. Headshots, joint strikes, weak points. Each bullet found its mark, but none stopped Zalvek. "You're good," Zalvek admitted, brushing off the damage. But not good enough. A plasma blade ignited from his wrist, a lethal arc of blue light designed to carve through armor, flesh, and bone. Phantom moved faster. He slipped into Zalvek's guard, knife flashing. A single, brutal slice tore through exposed cybernetics at the warlord's shoulder. Sparks burst, and Zalvek snarled, swiping wide with his plasma blade. Phantom barely avoided the strike, the heat of it searing across his ribs. He needed to end this. Now. Phantom feinted left, then lunged low, driving his combat knife deep into Zalvek's spinal interface. The cybernetic enhancements that made him unstoppable suddenly turned against him. Zalvek staggered. System failure warnings flared across his HUD. Phantom didn't hesitate. He grabbed the warlord's own fallen sidearm and pressed it against the base of his skull. "You're right," Phantom said. "It does end here." One shot. The Empire's greatest enforcer, gone. Phantom turned back to the transport, his breath steady despite the fight. He boarded, overriding the launch sequence. Engines roared to life. As the ship lifted off, Zenitar Prime shrank beneath him. A graveyard of Imperial arrogance. The Empire had tried to bury him. Now, it was his turn to bury them. Tackle between him and complete freedom. As expected, the moment he breached the warship's sensor range, alarms blared through the comms. "Unknown vessel, power down and prepare for boarding," an officer barked. Phantom didn't comply. Instead, he accelerated. Straight toward them. The Judicator's defenses activated instantly. Turrets locked on. Fighters scrambled. They expected a desperate escape attempt. They didn't expect a man who had already won. Phantom's fingers danced over the controls, deploying the transport's hacked transponder codes. Imperial clearance stolen from Zenitar systems. For 3 seconds, the warship hesitated. 3 seconds was all he needed. He hit the thrusters, cutting power at the last moment. The transport spun just beneath the warship's dorsal guns, too close for the main turrets to track. Then he was inside the docking bay, landing gear screeching against the deck. Before the first security team even arrived, Phantom was already moving. The warship wasn't a barrier. It was his next weapon. He cut through the corridors with brutal efficiency, eliminating security, overriding locks, planting disruptors in the command systems. By the time the bridge realized what was happening, Phantom was already there. The captain turned in horror as Phantom stepped onto the command deck, rifle raised. You. A single shot dropped the first officer. The rest of the crew froze. Phantom didn't waste words. He moved to the control terminal and transmitted a single, untraceable data packet. The stolen Imperial intelligence. Every secret the Empire had buried, covert operations, war crimes, classified weaknesses. Now, in the hands of its enemies. By the time the Empire realized what had happened, it would be too late. He turned back to the bridge crew. No alarms. No resistance. They knew better. Phantom walked off the bridge as silent as he had entered. By the time the Empire sent reinforcements, the Judicator would be adrift, disabled, its command chain shattered. By the time they pieced together what had happened, entire sectors would be rising against them. Phantom disappeared into the void. The Empire had built a prison to contain him. Instead, they had unleashed him.